Let's jump right into this explainer, because today we're uncovering what's actually happening in the minds and bodies of students with tic disorders. If you're an educator, I bet you've had a student who just couldn't sit still, making sudden noises or seeming completely zoned out. But what if everything we thought we knew about that disruptive behavior was, well, barely scratching the surface? Seriously, today we're going to completely flip the script on how we support these kids in the classroom. To really show up for our students, we have to start by asking a pretty crucial question, one that shifts our whole perspective from just managing their outward behavior to actually understanding their internal world. We spend a ton of time observing what tics look like, to us, right, the adults in the room. But how often do we stop and ask the child what a tic actually feels like to them? Well, Dr. In-Yang Takon actually did just that. Her research asked kids aged 6 to 10 this exact question. And honestly, their answers completely changed the game. One child described the feeling as being like bubbling grapes inside a lidded container. I mean, what a vivid metaphor. Historically, we assumed kids under 10 just weren't cognitively mature enough to describe the feelings leading up to a tic. But by asking them directly in a safe space, Dr. Takon found out that these younger kids have a profound, highly distressing awareness of exactly what's happening inside their bodies. So here's our quick roadmap for today. First, the hidden world of tics. Second, understanding premonitory urges. Third, the ADHD fidgetiness confound. And finally, practical classroom accommodations. All right, section 1, the hidden world of tics, the tip of the iceberg. Let's start with those outward behaviors we all see every single day. The traditional clinical definition calls tics sudden, involuntary, non-rhythmic movements or vocalizations. They typically pop up right when a child is entering the school system, usually between 5 and 7 years old, and they actually tend to peak in severity around ages 10 to 12. Now, while we used to think of these just as involuntary motor actions, kind of like a physical glitch, we now know that come with a massive sensory component that completely dictates that child's reality in your classroom. Just listen to this from a 7-year-old boy. He said, "Even when my body tries not to do it, it still happens." It's absolutely heartbreaking, right? It reminds us that what looks like a simple disruption to our lesson is actually a child fighting an exhausting internal battle. They don't want to make that noise. They really don't want to jerk their shoulder. They're trying so desperately to stop it. Okay, section 2, understanding premonitory urges, beneath the surface. Let's dive deeper and explore the invisible sensory storms that actually trigger those movements, because this is where the real struggle happens. So the big concept here is the premonitory urge, or what's sometimes called a tic alert. Basically, these are physical sensations in the body that cause major distress and discomfort. The feeling just builds and builds, getting more and more intense until the child literally has to perform the movement just to get some relief. So the tic isn't some random spasm. It's actually a desperate attempt to relieve an unbearable internal itch or pressure. When we contrast dry clinical terms with these raw, child-voiced descriptions, it really helps build empathy for the incredible sensory overload these kids are dealing with. Medical literature might coldly call it tension, but a 10-year-old in the study, they described it as feeling like, "My brain is going to burst." Just imagine trying to solve a math fraction or read out loud when you feel like your brain is literally going to burst, or like there are bubbling grapes trapped under your skin. And you know what? The urge itself is often reported by kids as being way more distressing and way worse for their schoolwork than the actual physical tic. Dr. Takon's research shows that kids feel intensely bothered, which completely kills their concentration. They're super uncomfortable, totally frustrated by their lack of control, and filled with immense worry. Basically, this sensory urge hijacks all their cognitive resources. They aren't focusing on learning, they're just trying to survive the physical sensation. Moving on to section 3, the ADHD fidgetiness confound. This is a fascinating ripple effect, and it actually solves a mystery you've probably witnessed but maybe miscategorized. There is a massive overlap between these conditions. Comorbidity with tic disorders is basically the rule, not the exception. We're talking about an 85 to 90% comorbidity rate, most often with ADHD and OCD. But because of this massive overlap, we have to be super careful about what we're actually observing in the classroom. When a kid with tics is hyperactive, is it always ADHD? Well, get ready for an aha moment. That child squirming in their seat, wriggling from side to side, totally zoning out during your lesson, they might not be displaying traditional ADHD hyperactivity at all. Instead, they might be deep in intense tic suppression. They're writhing and fidgeting to exert massive cognitive energy against that awful bubbling grape sensory urge, just desperately trying to keep the tic hidden so they don't get in trouble or teased. The fidgetiness is a byproduct of suppression. It's not a deficit of attention. And this quote directly from Dr. Togon's research hits the nail on the head. A 10-year-old student explicitly says that their poor focus is a direct result of funneling all their mental energy into keeping everything hidden. They mentioned tapping an ankle to stop a different tic, fighting this internal sensory war, and finding it, in their words, really annoying because it stops them from concentrating. We absolutely can't punish a child for inattention when their attention is entirely hijacked by their own nervous system. Which brings us to Section 4, Practical Classroom Accommodations, rising to the surface. Armed with this new perspective, let's look at how we can practically support these students in our schools. Simple environmental tweaks and peer education can cause massive improvements in classroom harmony without having to immediately rely on heavy medications. In fact, meds are usually just reserved for highly disabling tics. For most students, psychoeducation is our best tool. Educating the child's peers helps prevent the bullying and social isolation that unfortunately happens so often. Restructuring the environment to reduce stress, which, by the way, is a major trigger, and providing school counseling makes a world of difference. Plus, teachers can coordinate with outside therapies, like habit reversal therapy, where kids learn competing responses to those premonitory urges. But one of the most powerful, immediate tools you can use is establishing safe release breaks. Remember, suppressing a tic ramps up that internal tension to an agonizing level. So by setting up a private, subtle signal, like maybe the student just taps the corner of their desk, they can let you know the urges are getting overwhelming. Then, you let them step out to a designated safe space. It could be the counselor's office or just a quiet corner of the library, so they can simply let the tics out without any fear of judgment. It's a minor accommodation, but it gives the student immense relief from the grueling task of constant suppression. And then, they can return to class actually ready to learn. Ultimately, our goal as educators is to stop punishing the visible behavior and start accommodating the invisible sensory struggle. When we recognize that a tic isn't a behavioral choice, but the release of an intolerable physical urge, it changes the entire dynamic of the classroom. We stop demanding unrealistic stillness, and we start facilitating genuine support. I want to leave you with a final thought to reflect on today, and I really hope it inspires you to look at your students with a renewed, empathetic lens. The next time you see a child squirming, distracted, or making an unexpected movement, just pause. Ask yourself, are they acting out? Or are they fighting a hidden battle to hold it all in? Thanks for tuning into this explainer. And here's to building classrooms where every student's invisible struggles are met with visible compassion.